Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. I am genuinely so glad you're joining me today. We're going to take a really gentle, insightful journey together into the very core of who we are, pulling from some incredibly powerful source material about family stories and the emotional baggage we all tend to carry around. If you've ever felt like you're just playing a role, or, I don't know, that life just feels a little too heavy lately, This Explainer is absolutely for you. I really want you to think of me today not just as a host, but as a guide, someone walking right alongside you as we explore some pretty deep, transformative concepts. So let's dive into this together and see what we can uncover. I want you to start by picturing something super tangible. Imagine you are lugging around a really heavy suitcase, and you've been holding on to this thing for most of your life. At first, you absolutely knew you were carrying it, right? You felt the weight of it in your arm, the strain in your shoulder. But as years and years pass, something kind of fascinating happens. That heavy weight begins to feel completely normal. You literally stop noticing the strain. You just start to assume that this heaviness is simply part of who you are. It's just how it feels to walk through the world.
Now, what's really wild is how perfectly that physical metaphor applies to our emotional lives. The source material highlights this profound shift we go through. What begins as a temporary adaptation eventually becomes our identity. You see, in childhood or during really chaotic times, we develop emotional survival strategies just to protect ourselves. We adapt. But as time goes on, that layer of protection starts to feel like our actual personality. We spend years lugging around that heavy emotional suitcase, just telling ourselves, well, this is just who I am. When in reality, we might just be looking at a survival response that somehow became a permanent way of life.
Let's move into Section 1, Recognizing Your Survival Masks. As we begin to gently open up that suitcase, please hear this. Becoming aware of the masks you wear is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. We are looking at these strategies completely without judgment today. Identifying these masks isn't about feeling shame, not at all. These masks were the exact tools that helped you survive chaotic, unpredictable, or even unsafe environments in the past. They served a really vital purpose once. Right now, we're just checking in to see if they're actually still serving you today.
Section 2. The Perfectionist. The perfectionist is an incredibly common mask to find in our emotional suitcase. And honestly, it's one that often gets praised by society, which makes it super hard to let go of. It almost always stems from a very specific childhood lesson. Maybe you grew up in a place where criticism was exceptionally harsh. Or maybe love in your household just felt conditional, like success brought warm approval while failure brought this really cold disappointment. Out of that environment, you learned a simple, deeply protective lesson. If I can be perfect, I can stay safe.
Notice the stark divide the perfectionist has to live with every single day. On the outside, this person looks highly successful, responsible, they've got it all together. But look at the inner reality: pure exhaustion, constant pressure, and a deep underlying terror of making a mistake. In your daily life, this might look like agonizing over a 3-sentence email for an hour before finally hitting send, or working way late into the night just to make absolutely sure a project is quote-unquote flawless. But here's the secret. Perfectionism is rarely about actual excellence. It is almost entirely about protection.
Section 3. The People Pleaser. This is a mask worn by those who learn to survive by constantly scanning their environment, always reading the room just to keep the peace at all costs. And their foundational belief is honestly heartbreakingly simple. If everyone else is okay, well, maybe I'll be okay too. People with this mask became total experts at noticing tiny shifts in mood or unspoken tension, mostly because they grew up in environments where their own emotional safety felt entirely uncertain. Managing the emotions of everybody else around them became their way of ensuring their own survival.
Look at the huge contrast here. The people pleaser wears a mask that looks like purest, selfless kindness. They avoid conflicts, they keep the peace. But the fearful reality running underneath is that they are totally depleted and really struggle with boundaries. In daily life, this looks like saying yes to helping a friend move on a Saturday when you are already physically and emotionally running on empty, simply because the thought of disappointing them feels genuinely dangerous. It looks like kindness, for sure, but it's actually driven by fear.
So perfectionism and people-pleasing are just two really common examples. But the truth is, we armor ourselves in so many different ways. You might recognize the hyper-independent survivor, someone who refuses help because trusting others just led to massive disappointment in the past. Or maybe the controller who manages every tiny little detail because life once felt way too out of control. Then there's the achiever, always chasing awards to fill an emotional void. Or the emotional wall, who completely blocks out all vulnerability just to avoid any future pain.
Moving on to Section 4. The Mirror Moment. Impact on Loved Ones. Okay, as protective as these masks have been for us, we have to realize they don't exist in a vacuum. Our survival strategies directly impact our communication and our connection with our family, our partners, and our friends. And here, we absolutely must explicitly distinguish between understanding our behavior and excusing it. Understanding our behavior explains our past and helps create deep self-compassion, but it does not excuse our behavior. Using our past pain to just erase consequences or ignore the unintended harm our masks might cause other people is a major trap. Like, if your emotional wall mask makes your partner feel totally abandoned, understanding why you built the wall is essential, but it does not excuse the pain that wall is causing them right now.
Now, this shouldn't feel heavy. It should actually feel incredibly empowering. The moment we acknowledge how our fear or our need for control affects others, we create responsibility. And responsibility is actually a beautiful thing because it gives us the power of choice. You are no longer just running on autopilot. You're finally back in the driver's seat of your relationships.
Section 5. Steps to Unmasking Identity.
So how do we actually put down this heavy suitcase? Well, it's a gentle, patient process. Step 1, awareness without shame. You just notice the mask without beating yourself up for wearing it. Step 2, acknowledge the impact it has on you and the people around you. And step 3, take responsibility to create choice. Remember, these masks were learned behaviors, which means, wonderfully, they can be unlearned. It's not going to happen perfectly overnight, but gradually, you really can step out of the armor.
Section 6. Thoughtful Reflections. I actually invite you to pause this explainer on these next few questions if you need to. Grab a journal or just sit quietly for a second. I want you to be incredibly honest with yourself here. Out of all the strategies we just discussed, the perfectionist, the people pleaser, the controller, the achiever, the emotional wall, which one did you feel right in your gut? Which one is the primary item taking up space in your emotional suitcase?
Try to look right past the shiny, capable, or super agreeable outer appearance of your mask. What is really sitting underneath it? Is it profound exhaustion? Is it a deep fear of being unlovable? A fear of chaos? Looking at what hides beneath is exactly how we begin to strip the mask away.
Think about how you communicate with your loved ones. How might your deep need for protection be unintentionally blocking true connection? Is your hyper-independence making your partner feel completely unneeded? Is your people-pleasing creating a quiet resentment inside of you? Just reflect on how the armor that was meant to keep you safe might actually be keeping love at a distance. And finally, Section 7, moving toward authentic living. As we wrap up our time together, please remember this isn't just some intellectual exercise. This is about a beautiful, truly life-altering transition from merely surviving your life to actually living it authentically. I really want to leave you with this compassionate reminder. You are not broken. There's absolutely nothing fundamentally wrong with you. You adapted, you survived, and now you're simply recognizing that carrying the suitcase of survival mode is just no longer necessary. The true you, that amazing person beneath all that heavy armor, has been there all along, waiting so patiently to be seen by the world.
I'm going to leave you with this final, lingering question. Imagine setting that heavy suitcase down on the floor and just walking away from it. What would it physically and emotionally feel like to live with a little less armor and a whole lot more authenticity? Take a deep breath, think about that lighter, unmasked life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it brought you some clarity today.